Karen, do you have access to that Teams meeting?
I can jump on it on my phone. Yes, let me see. But I don't think it would let me in because I fired it up too just to see, and it said like somebody will let me in when the meeting starts. Let me see what I can do here. Yeah, it just says someone in the meeting would let me in soon.
Robin, do you have access to it on your laptop? Because we sent an email out saying that it was going to be on Zoom. Can you open that meeting? The Teams meeting? Because it's not letting me open it from here. Were you able to do it? I don't know if that worked. I probably just canceled everything.
Liz, this is Chantel. Robin is sending the Zoom link through email and all the Zoom information through email to those that aren't currently on the meeting.
Okay, but we do have a quorum. Ready?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MAG Public Safety Answering Point Managers Group. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking so that those joining virtually can hear you. For those participating via Zoom, please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. When speaking, please state your name and when making a comment or asking a question. Phone participants should use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise their hand. The MAG public comment process provides opportunities for members of the public to comment on items scheduled on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. 2 opportunities are provided for public comment, including call to the audience and action items to be heard. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website prior to the meeting, as long as the comments are received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start for the meeting. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway. Please be sure to indicate the item for which you want to speak and give it to a designated MAG staff member. If you parked in the garage, remember to validate your ticket. Parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Please note that hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. MAG staff will now take a roll call to ensure we have a quorum present for the meeting.
Okay, I'll go through the list of members. Make sure you're unmuted and indicate you are present when I call your name. Ian Walter, AMR, Rural Metro. Lisa M. Heiser for Apache Junction.
I'm here.
Trish Price, SUPD.
Present.
Mike Folia, Avondale PD.
Mike Foley is here.
Jim Tortora, Buckeye PD,
Present.
Stephanie Heinzelman, Chandler PD,
Present.
Kiara Nielsen, Arizona DPS,
Present.
Stephanie Beebe, Fort McDowell, Kim Weber, Gilbert PD,
Kim Weber, present.
Loretta Hadlock, Glendale PD,
Loretta Hadlock, present.
Shauna Henry, Goodyear PD,
Present.
David Demers, Luke Air Force Base, Jim Stillwell, MCSO,
Present.
Nicole York, Mesa Fire. Do we have somebody as a proxy for Nicole? Matt Omer, Mesa PD,
Present.
Heather Beckwith, Paradise Valley,
Present.
Brittany Brunet, Peoria,
Present.
Nicole Diedrich, Phoenix Fire Department. Do we have a proxy for Nicole? Dan McNamee, Phoenix PD,
Present.
Dave Martin, Salt River PD, Karen Sutherland, Scottsdale PD,
Present.
and Damala Fennessy, Surprise. I'm sorry, Damala, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm present.
Okay. Tanya Logan, Tempe PD,
Present.
Amanda Howard, Tolleson PD,
Present.
Lieutenant Aaron Hadley, Wickenburg.
Aaron Hadley, present.
Is there anyone I did not call that is present? Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, our next item is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Members of the public who are attending in person may deliver their comments from the lectern at the front of the room. You have up to 3 minutes to complete your comments. A timer is provided to assist you. When the light on the timer changes from green to yellow, you have 1 minute remaining. If the light turns red, a buzzer will sound, meaning your allotted time has expired. We have received no speaker cards for this agenda item.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have no comments for any items on this.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the MAG fiscal year 2024 Psap annual element funding request and fiscal year 2024 to 2029 equipment program. The committee will be asked to review and recommend approval of the MAG fiscal year 2024 Psap annual element funding request and fiscal year 2024 to 2029 equipment program. Liz Graber will provide a report on this item.
Thank you, Brittany. So as requested, we sent out the itemized budget to show each of the what is behind the original spreadsheet that you saw with the chart, and also for the quotes for your Psap upgrades. The problem we have with quotes is we request them in July, and not all of the vendors are responsive on getting them to us. The one vendor that completed all of the quotes was Intrado. Motorola completed everybody but Peoria and Wickenburg, and Solacom has yet to turn us in any quotes. So that's why you weren't given quotes from all the vendors, is because they have not, and they haven't given us anything for me to submit. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and discuss questions on the budget now that you have the material.
Couple of questions that I just wanted to clarify. My understanding was that Phoenix upgrade had been delayed to the 2024 fiscal year. And that ASU and Avondale were moved to 2023. So I'm not sure, is that correct?
That is our plan. That was not done for this process of the budget. We still have to get quotes and to be able to move those over. But since we don't have all the quotes that we need, and we have to have those that requested the demos to choose their selection so we can refine it. Once those get done, then we will do a budget amendment with the state. We've already submitted a budget amendment for Phoenix PD and splitting their project between the 2 fiscal years. So in this fiscal year, they will have equipment and warranties and network equipment funded. And then next year will be Vestas services with training, installation, and support. So part of that's been done. We're just waiting for the dust to settle on what product is wanted by which Psap, and then we'll do another amendment to the state to include those as well.
Do you have any idea when you would have those quotes?
Yeah, Karen, I've asked for them and they always say the next day, but they never come the next day. So I'll go back to them and ask them again, Motorola and Solacom, to see when we can get those quotes.
My concern is that it doesn't, the budget that we're being asked to approve then isn't actually what we're going to be budgeting for that year.
So Karen, if you can remember that we what is based on this budget will allow us to get MAG approval on the current budget with the opportunity to amend it. But we need to get this budget approved or disapproved. We need a budget to send through the MAG process before the notice of funding comes out in December, is the last what they did last year. So to be able to meet the grant deadline, we need to have some sort of a budget in place and approved through MAG.
So Liz, this is Shauna Goodyear. I have a quick question about that. In talking with the state, they advised that that is not a hard and fast date, that we can actually ask them for an extension or we can, that is not a date that by X date it has to be in or there's no funding. Is that the understanding of MAG? Is that if we don't have this budget approved and in by December 1st, there's no funding? Because that's not accurate.
So Shauna, can you tell me when you had this meeting with the state on the grant?
I talked to Travis yesterday.
Okay, so he has not, the state 911 office has not reached out and to let us know that the grant application is flexible on its date. So that information he's giving you, he has not provided to me or my office.
Okay, is that something that you need to talk to him about, or is that something that they have to reach out to you, or do you get a hold of them? Because they said that and I know in the last meeting you said that they change the due dates every year to year, so you're never sure what they are. And that may be where that's coming from, is that it's not a hard and fast date and it just is one that they set to open the grant process.
So with the grant process, they've given us when we can enter, and then we have a deadline. So the fact that they met with you and said that it's flexible has not been conveyed to me. So we will meet with the state and have something formal provided for us so we know that we have that flexibility.
Okay, because that gives us some leeway. We don't absolutely have to have this passed and through the process by specific, that even the December 1st date, we've got a little bit of time to look at the process and not worry too much about not having funding or losing funding.
So either way, I believe, Shauna, we need to have a vote on the budget, whether it's a denial of a recommend or a pass of a recommend. Either way, we're going to have a vote on the budget.
Okay, and then what happens if it's a denial? What happens then? I mean, I know what happens if it's a pass. I'm just curious what happens if it doesn't pass, because I've never come across that.
Sean, I'm going to pause you right there. I'm going to let Nathan Pryor from MAG make a comment.
Good morning. My name is Nathan Pryor. I'm the Policy and Government Relations Director here at the Maricopa Association of Governments. So just by way of reminder in terms of the process, so obviously PSAP managers, there's a call for budgeted items that usually goes out in the late spring, early summer timeframe. You all, member agencies, PSAP, submit your budget items for review. That obviously all gets rolled up. This is the first stop in that process, pending recommended approval. The next stop in the process is the MAG 911 Oversight Team, largely comprised of police and fire chiefs and similar from the region. After that, it goes to the MAG Management Committee. Those are city, town managers and related from counties and native nations. And then beyond that, it goes to the MAG Regional Council. So those are the mayors and similar that are ultimately the board that approves the budget. So typically, again, that's our time frame. In the past 2 years, so I went back 7 years of approvals. Past 2 years, we've come right up against it. And in the kind of November timeframe is when it's gone to regional council, then of course submitted to the state. The prior 5 years, however, is more of our normal practice. And I think it was a practice that staff would be recommending going forward, is that approval by regional council occurs in the October and sometimes September timeframe. So as I mentioned, beyond this committee, there's 3 more committees that review the budget. So if we're right up against a potential timeline and deadline, that does not give those other 3 committees an opportunity to vet the budget that's been recommended. So I think the preference and practice would be not to be right up against timelines, forcing potentially city managers and mayors who also might have questions in trying to buy more time, if you will, and running out of time and submitting to the state. This information about not needing to submit by December is new information. We'll take that into account, but I think staff would recommend that we proceed on our normal path per our practice in developing the budget and submitting it up to the committee chain for approval.
Okay, so I understand the typical practice, but I guess my question is, we've come up against something this year that apparently we haven't come up against previously. So what occurs if this committee cannot come to a consensus today?
I think we would need to review that. I know that the 911 Oversight Team from their meeting from last week is awaiting the recommended budget for consideration of their approval. I know that this is going up to the government relations staff level. So there are eyes on this process now. We'll have to take those as they come. Ultimately, the regional council is the board of this agency, so they can take action regardless. So just note that.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
It's Mike Foley. I have a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
So in this budget that we're viewing that Karen mentioned, it's not exactly up to date. Has this happened before, Liz, where in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, you had a project that was slated, but it's going to have to get pushed back and you made those changes? Has that ever happened before in your time?
Yes, we've had that several times where PSAPs are moving, and MCSO is a good example that they were moving to a new building and ran into several problems on funding and getting the place. And so they requested their project to be pushed year after year. So I think it was a total of 3 years before we were able to land on it. So that's not uncommon. And it's not uncommon as quotes come in and we finalize things closer because what you have is budgetary quotes. And once we start the project, we go through it with a fine tooth comb to make sure there's anything we're lacking or need to add or that we need to take away that is not required. And we submit those. The MAG budgeting process allows us to adjust budgets within 10%, as long as it's not 10% over. back in 2007. Phoenix PD's project. We had to take a special vote on it, on that upgrade, because it took it over what had been approved. And so we took that amendment through the MAG process to add funding because it was over the 10% budget that was passed earlier that year.
Chair and members of the committee, I just want to let you know that Kim Weber has had her hand up and to speak, and as well as Jim Stillwell.
Kim Weber, go ahead.
This is Kim. Thank you. I've got a couple comments and then I need to ask for permission to go over some other questions on the budget, but I can do that after Jim makes his comment. In reference to the timeline that Nathan was referring to, I understand budget process. I think we all in the room as managers understand the budget process and being on time and submitting the documents as needed. But I think the greater question as to why we're even here today is that we have a responsibility to these public funds that we're getting dispersed to make sure that they are being used accurately and for what they should be used for. As far as for prior processes, I think that's on us, Psap managers, to take responsibility that we didn't ask questions in prior years, myself included. And this year, we're changing that and seeking to understand more what we're asking from 911 funds and what's being used. Therefore, we need to vet through this process and understand it. So we need to take extra time. We need to take that time to really understand what we're approving. I'm with Karen, where if we're approving a budget that's not going to be any semblance of what is actually being submitted to the state, that is an issue for me. I believe the state has given extensions for other things such as budget submittal invoices. I don't see how this is any different for submitting an extension for this budget process. We should investigate that and find out. And then one last comment before I yield over to Jim was a reference to what Shauna's question was. If we don't pass this, or if we have concerns and there's a split vote for whatever situation, I want to mention that the last 911 Oversight Committee meeting, the chair made a statement that regardless of what this Psap manager group is going to say or vote, they're prepared to move the budget forward. So I think that's a huge concern, that our centers are the ones that are affected by this budget. And there's a potential that our voice is not going to be heard. And with that, I yield to Jim. Thank you.
Jim Stillwell with MCSO.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to be very blunt here. However, these are my own opinions. I feel that the comments made by Nathan were using scare tactics and fear mongering, and to me were received as a veiled threat. We are here today on a special meeting, and if we can call a special meeting, your oversight, your management, any other committee and teams for MAG can call a special meeting. I refuse to give an in favor vote for any budget today that did not have the requested items that I requested at the last meeting. I am not going to arbitrarily hand out money and not be fiscally responsible to our cities, our municipalities, and our citizens for additional seats when these agencies cannot provide justification as to why they need these additional seats. And I yield the floor.
Other comments?
This is Kim Weber. If there are no other comments, I'd like to go through a list of questions I have regarding the budget, but I want to afford the other managers opportunity to ask questions as well.
Go ahead, Kim.
So we look at the spreadsheet on the workstation asks. My first question is, what are we basing the cost off of? From what I see is just a flat 25,000 per seat. But I know that depending on what system you're using, it's going to cost differently. Viper versus Vesta. So is that just a placeholder? How are we coming up with that number?
Kim, that's correct. That's a placeholder because we don't know what product the PSAP schedule for the upgrades will use. So we use that as a placeholder. That's an average of what position costs. And then we make the adjustments up or down accordingly when we do the final quote before we service a purchase order.
Okay, so I wanted just to note that would be along the same concern as Phoenix's amendment, that it would change our budget request, that we're voting on something that's going to be different. I understand that with the quote, my request would be that we would have attempted to get a quote for existing systems that agencies already use to make it a little bit more in line. But aside from that, let's move to line 29.
Well, before we go to 29, can you, I guess I misunderstood. Do you want quotes from the systems they're using currently?
So for example, I'll point out Scottsdale PD. They're asking for 2 positions, right? And they just cut to Vesta. So could we not have come up with a closer number to what it would cost to get 2 Vesta positions for them?
We can when we do the grant, but this is a placeholder. So.
Okay.
And Scottsdale, yeah, for their 2 positions, because I see what you're saying. And that's something we can consider, but the ones that are for the upgrades is what I'm speaking of. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Line 29, it states that the cost center is for wireline. My understanding is once we move to NGCS, which is slated for the fall, wirelines are going away. So what is this line item in reference to?
Besides wireline, what else does it say on it? We don't have line numbers on our sheet. I'm sorry.
Its description is RSA-M&S.
So when prior to NG 911 with the changes, the state required categorizations of different items. And so wireline in their budget process reflected everything that had to do with wireline calls, all equipment, all maintenance, and then the carrier's wireline. And then when wireless was introduced, that's where that division was made. So we're looking at changing that verbiage instead of it having PSAP needs, networking, projects. I'm trying to think of all of them, in personnel. So when you see wireline on this particular budget, that could involve maintenance, and RSA is how we remote into your positions and do work online to your PSAPs.
Okay. For the Psap upgrades, I think that's the next chunk of, if you scroll or look down on your sheet, there's the Psap switching and monitoring, Psap wiring, server ILO. All of that is related to the upgrades of the agencies. Can you explain what the difference is between the items related to Psap switching monitoring versus wiring versus server ILO? What is the breakout between that?
So as part of your CPE equipment that we get from the vendor, because Kim, you're on a network, a 911 network, we have to have networking equipment that connects you into the EZNet and that can carry I3 compliant data. So part of a project is when we do an upgrade, not only are we quoting out the vendor, the CPE, but we have to have all the components for the network as well. So wiring has to do if there's any cabling that has to be done or any networking cabling or wiring that we might have to have done. Switching and monitoring is part of giving you a secure 911 network. We monitor the network for outages or problems with carriers or anything like that. So that's a vital part of what we do, is monitoring your center to make sure that there's not a problem with any of the carriers. Server ILO has to do with licensing for the servers to be able to to provide the security we need. The service session border controllers, those are a switch that acts as a firewall, might be a better description of it, so that when you, for example, your SIP admin trunks, for them to touch our system, they have to go through an SBC, excuse me, and then they go through your city SBC and then through ours. So that's a type of security to make sure nothing nefarious gets pushed through to our network. And that's what the border control is. And then the charges, the install is for the services to get those installed.
So these charges for all that, is this contracted out to vendors? Is that why there's a line item, or what encompasses that payment out, since it's not included in the upgrade line item?
Because it has to do with networking and not the CPE. This has to do with the EZNet. So Vesta, thank you. Vesta is not providing an EZNet Viper, so they're not providing our EZNet. We do the networking. So that's the backroom portion of it. No matter what vendor you choose, you have to have this equipment.
What portion of that is already being done by the state to move Arizona to NGCS?
The state hasn't released any of that information to me, so I couldn't answer to that.
Okay, we should make a note to get that from the state so we understand what costs are already absorbed by the statewide NG911 project that we don't necessarily have to incur in our budget.
So Kim, as you remember, it's designed to have two EZNets, one within our region and one with the states that provide everywhere else. The goal would be that further down the road, after the state gets switched, that we would then have redundant networks so that no Psap could experience a failure, that it could default back to another EZNet, whether it's Comtech's EZNet defaulting to us or vice versa, us defaulting to Comtech. We didn't want to put everybody in the state under one EZNet. So
Yes,
yeah, cheaper, but that's the price you would pay for not having that kind of redundancy.
Yes, I am aware of the network diagram that shows that MR911 added an additional layer within the system. But I think the discussion about redundancy is for another meeting, so I'll move on so we don't waste our time. So the session border control installation line items. With this, my experience with this is that you, MR911, contracted this out. Is this not something that can be done in-house at MR911 techs?
So in your instance with your admin session border controller, that was for a session that was done at our first one. So we learned from it. We got assistance from the professional services from the vendor. And at that point forward, we've been able to manage those ourselves.
Okay.
And these are for 911.
Yes.
Okay.
So for line, I'm sorry, it's not line 91 for the online folks. And for you looking at the spreadsheet, it's the 911 administrative assistant line item.
Yes.
Is there a reason why this isn't put under personnel costs to free up the 1.67 admin funds to maybe be used for the tech certification that's up above, listed above in line 80, or vendor trainings or other project upgrade related items versus using the 1.67% admin fund for a staffing position?
The state statute prohibits that admin has to be out of the 1.67 that we get from the state every year. It's approximately 150,000, maybe 100. This year it was 150,000. So that's where we get the admin funds. Anything that's left over in that we use for travel for the technicians or anything that's required is that, because they do allow you to use have travel in that as well. But the funds, there's not that much left over of the 150. And because the admin is not part of 911 call delivery or 911 maintenance, that's why they're not considered part of the maintenance and call delivery personnel.
Okay. And then, so I understand better, there, under your staffing line items, there are the staffing line item that has a cost center quoted as Psap expense and recurs. What is that? What is the difference between a cost center for Psap expense versus GIS versus network? If it's a staff position.
I'm sorry, I'm looking to see what you're looking at. Okay, so I'm sorry. So a PSAP expense is what has to do with keeping you going, whether it's spare parts for something that goes out, whether that's maintenance, whether that's your software support for your equipment, anything like that that is directly to the PSAP is a PSAP expense. So personnel that under PSAP expense, that's the maintenance portion of our group. That answer.
Okay. And then for the staff line item for personnel, there's one that states is for, I'm assuming it's for overtime expense, because it says overtime dash contentious topic last year that the state wasn't going to fund overtime. So why do we have this line item again?
Because the state did reconsider and approved us doing overtime.
For the budget year
That was from
that
Steve.
they said they denied it?
Yep. After that April meeting, when we presented it, I met with Stephen Jenkins and with ADOA, and he said that we could indeed have overtime. That's why we didn't have to come up with a new plan of charging it, or the PSAPs had to cover it because the state reconsidered and is paying overtime. I think we discussed that in our September meeting or August meeting.
No, in our August meeting, it was stated that you were using staffing vacancy to cover overtime. So this is different from what was stated last month.
So the overages. So yeah.
So your vacant positions, staffing.
Yeah, but they'd still pay overtime. The overtime was not going to be refused. So it didn't impact this year's budget because we had the vacancy overages, but we still submit for overtime because we have to have it.
Yes, I agree. We need to ensure that MR911 is able to support the PSAPs 24/7 on call when we need it. I just don't want us to run into a situation again like we did last year where you come out and tell us that there's no overtime approval and that agencies are possibly looking at having to pay for staff overtime callouts. So can I make a request that we clarify this is acceptable to submit in the budget with the state? And if it's not, then that we have a game plan on how to cover that overtime.
So noted. So what we'll do is, because this is a PSAP, this is a MAG approval, and we all agree that we want overtime for our to be able for the technicians to work on our PSAPs, that we'll leave it in our MAG budget. And then if we have to put it in as an individual cost for each of those that are eligible to work overtime, or if we do it as a funding, we can submit it with the grant, with the idea that if the state denies overtime for maintenance on the PSAPs, then we will come back to MAG through the MAG process to come up with a funding element on how to cover those costs so that you get the service you need regardless of the overtime.
Okay. And then can you explain what the vehicle line item is for? Is that for gas, mileage reimbursement, maintenance? What is that?
No, for vehicles, our vehicles are old and they have to be replaced. We've been giving maintenance on some of them. We've been driving some of them since 2005, so they need to be replaced. And those
And
are.
how many,
I'm sorry,
how many are we asking for?
two. We don't overwhelm them. We have, all our technicians have vehicles and our technical team. So that's so they can respond to your center if they need to.
Okay. And my last question, thanks for entertaining me. The last line item for the wireless recovery cost, my understanding is that that went away. So why do we need this line item?
What are you basing that on, Kim, that it went away?
There's some articles out in the news that stated the wireless cost recovery was not legal.
I have
And they-
I've not been told that it is not a legal source. That's in state statute. So until there's something from the state attorney's office or something more legal, I'm obligated to pay that fee. So I haven't read anything in the news about it, but that's the kind of documentation why I need to stop paying that vendor because of the ARS code.
And I think we need to do our due diligence and follow up on that. If there's a potential that we don't have to pay this, that we don't pay money that we don't need to.
Okay, can you provide me the details of what you read and we can investigate?
I absolutely will. And that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Do I have any other members that would like to comment or have questions? Karen Sutherland with Scottsdale, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I had a couple of questions that were based on the quotes that the vendors provided. The first question that I had has to do with Viper. I know from the meetings that we've had over the last couple of years, some of the problems that agencies have had that went to the Viper upgrade. And so I'm actually a little bit surprised to see their quotes in there at all. And is that something that we are still recommending for our centers, or are we at least bringing them in to make an option for the three? And along with that, I'm wondering if we should be considering going like the rest of the counties and using the same vendor so that we could end up we could use them for hot seating or things like that. So that is question one.
Okay, so as you recall, when you were up for your upgrade, Karen, we had all three vendors go out to Scottsdale so your people could look at it and decide which vendor they wanted. There are PSAPs still in the region that have Viper, and until they get an opportunity to look at them, we don't know what they're going to choose. But if you are suggesting we do all the same vendor, I think that's something that needs to be brought up as part of the study committee and not the budget. But we wanted to include all the quotes that were a part of it, and Entrada was on that list as well.
My biggest concern was just that the rest of the state is not even considering Viper because of the problems that they've had with it. And so I would be hesitant for any of us to jump on board with a vendor that has not been providing throughout the state. The other question that I had has to do with the Vesta quotes. And I notice in the Vesta quotes that you attached that the Vesta mapping solution is in there, as well as the smart transcription and citizen input. And is that something that we are now funding for agencies?
Which quote are you referring to, Karen?
I believe it was both of the ASU and Avondale both had the Vesta quotes that you sent, and both of them listed it.
Gilbert.
Gilbert has smart transcription, citizen input, and Vesta map local.
And it should
The
be,
other agencies only have map local listed.
yeah, so they had requested those to be on them. So all of our quotes going forward will have those additional items on there.
So then going back to those of us that upgraded before this was allowed, is this something that can be added in or amended for the 2023 budget?
Yeah, you can always request anything if you can prepare documentation supporting what you want, and then we can get quotes, and then we can put it through the MAC process and then ask the state. And that includes a smart transcription. Has Scottsdale purchased smart transcription?
We have not made the purchase yet. I have the quotes. I've had the quotes for some time, but we have not made the purchase yet.
I see.
And additionally with that, the mapping solution are we looking at supplying the Vesta map for agencies instead of our map now?
I think that we haven't established that what the mapping will be, whether it's a hybrid. We're open to any of it. So it's discussions with the Psaps on what they want.
Liz, can you clarify on that statement? What do you mean you're open to the idea of hybrid?
So that, once again, that there can be multiple platforms of mapping. So there might be Psaps that want to keep our map, and they would be allowed to do so, but it doesn't mean that we can't look at other mapping. Phoenix PD has also requested to go to Vesta map.
And the support will be there for the Psap regardless of which platform they choose?
The support, meaning the technician?
The GIS support that we would need to make sure the maps.
Yeah,
are
the
maintained.
GIS has always been there, regardless of what map we've had since we started phase 2 back in 2005. So GIS is a separate thing. That's the data behind the map.
Okay, thank you.
Liz, I have a question on that. This is Loretta. Does that also include the interface with the Rapid SOS and the text to 911? I
Well-
mean, where we bring it all up in one system? I mean, that would be very beneficial, especially I know the large agencies, but the small agencies as well.
So the rapid deploy,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, rapid SOS, that comes in not on their map. The interface is in, and I forget what Vesta calls it, the Vesta local.
Mhm.
That's embedded in the screen. That's where that comes through.
So we would have to send, so myself and Karen, I think and Tempe as well, would have to send in some type of justification of having this feature added to our systems.
Yep. So we could do a budget amendment on it.
And would we get that quote from Motorola, or would you guys seek to get that quote, or how would that work?
If you're wanting it to be used state funds, you would need to send that. I would have to get the quote. So you would provide the justification of what you want it on a letterhead, make sure your chief's aware of it, and then we'll submit for a quote and send it through.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments and questions?
Yeah, Brittany, I have one more. This is Karen from Scottsdale again.
Go ahead, Karen.
It has to do with the cost that on previous budget years, the additional positions were listed as 50,000. And in this budget year, they're listed as 25,000. And I was curious as to how they dropped 50%.
With just a closer budgeted item, when we were doing 50, we usually had to add things because when you do, I'm trying to think of an example, MIS, ECATs, they do it by groups. And so if you go in, your extra positions push you up in the next category, then we have to account for those funds. Also, if you need any backroom equipment that because of your growth, if there's not enough server ports or anything like that, we have to account for your growth. But where you're outfitted now, we usually can just do it with the CPE.
I think part of what has brought us to this table and the reason that we're digging in harder this year than we have in previous years is because that we understand that for the past few years, we've left a considerable amount of money on the table at the end of the year. And so I think for me and possibly some of my counterparts here, we want to make sure that we're budgeting as close as we can to what the actual amounts are going to be. Because when we don't spend that money at the end of the year, we've taken away from other agencies and agencies within this county that could have used that money. So I guess I'm looking for something in this spreadsheet, and that's why we wanted quotes and such that tell us that we're actually asking the correct amount of money for the line items that we have.
Is that a question? Or a statement? I'm sorry.
Well, I guess it's a little of both. It's a statement that says why we're looking into it. And since we don't have quotes and we're put in the same position again, I guess I want to make sure that you are fairly certain of the amount of money that you've put in here and that we're not going to leave millions of dollars on the table at the end of this budget year.
So as we progress through the budget process, we can, and we've talked about this in previous meetings, we can look at do an assessment quarterly to see where we are spending, what PSAPs are, where they're at on their projects. We have to be careful. We don't want to spend money if it looks like that we're not counseling, but in cases where we're able to save money like we did with CenturyLink, we can reallocate that money to, we discuss where we would want to put it, what it would be applied for, and we can submit it to the state. So we absolutely can do that. We just have to be real careful that we're not cutting off ourselves at the knees doing that if a PSAP's not ready for their upgrade. So it gets pushed to the later of the year. You see what I'm saying? So if a $500,000 project is not ready, they're not ready to get it yet, and it's not going to go in July until July, then you run into that money wasn't spent before June 30th. And that's where it gets a little tricky. But I think that having the PSAPs and the 911 oversight look and redirect funds is a good way. It's a good idea.
This is Kim Weber. I just want to make a comment regarding what Karen stated. I think the concern with leaving money, quote unquote, on the table is that we are actually hurting ourselves as a state, a region, and industry when we do that, because that inhibits our efforts to ask for higher taxes in 911 excise tax if we're leaving money in the budget. It doesn't show that we need money. So I think that's where the questions and the requests are, that we stay in line with what we need so that the rest of the state can get the portion too and still be able to pursue getting our excise tax up. And that was just a comment.
Any other comments or questions from the members? Okay. This item is on the agenda to recommend approval of the MAG fiscal year 2024 PSAP annual element and funding request in fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2029 equipment program. Prior to approval of this item, do we have, is that where we are? Oh, prior to approval of this item, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item?
We received no public comment requests.
Could I have a motion to recommend approval of the MAG fiscal year 2024 Psap annual element funding request and fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2029 equipment program?
This is Mike Foley. I motion to approve.
Mike Folia from Avondale motions. Do I have somebody to second?
Heiser, Apache Junction.
Lisa Apache Junction. Lisa, that was Lisa at Apache Junction?
Yes.
Lisa from Apache Junction, second. Can I have a voice vote from those in the room? Those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating?
Point of clarification, staff, do we do a roll call, a complete roll call on this item? Okay. Lisa, Apache Junction.
I agree.
Mike Folia, Avondale PD.
A motion to move it forward.
Jim Tatora, Buckeye PD.
Aye.
Stephanie Chandler PD.
Aye.
Stephanie Fort McDowell. Kim Weber, Gilbert PD.
And Weber, I vote nay.
Loretta Hadlock, Glendale PD.
I vote no at this time.
No. Shauna Henry Goodyear.
Yeah, Carolyn Neal speaking for Shauna. She had to step out, and that would be a nay.
Jim Stillwell, MCSO.
I am completely 100% opposed. My vote is a nay, and I would like that documented in the minutes. Thank you.
Matt Omner, Mesa PD.
Aye.
Heather Beckwith, Paradise Valley PD.
Nay.
Brittany Brunet, Peoria PD.
Nay.
Dan McNamee, Phoenix PD.
Aye.
Dave Martin, Salt River PD.
Aye.
Karen Sutherland, Scottsdale PD. Karen Sutherland, Scottsdale PD.
That was a nay.
Damala Fennessy, Surprise PD.
Nay.
Tanya Logan, Tempe PD.
Nay.
Amanda Howard, Tollison.
Nay.
And Aaron Hadley, Wickenburg.
Nay at this time.
Brittany, can you hear me? This is Karen.
Yes, I can. Karen, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you got my nay.
Yep,
Yes, we did.
we captured that, Karen. Is there anyone I did not call? This agenda item has not passed.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 4 for a request for future agenda items. Are there any requests by memberships for an item on a future agenda? I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Nathan Pryor with MAG.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Psap Managers Group. We'll be collecting kind of questions, if you will, giving a deadline of Thursday, September 29th, close of business. That can be sent to Chantel Alberton Oviedo. Just anything under the sun regarding system, technical, budget. I think that's going to help inform future conversations, including what we anticipate as a joint meeting of the Psap Managers Group with the 911 Oversight Team, tentatively scheduled for October 5th. So those questions, again, could help round out presentation in terms of that discussion. So again, Chantel can follow up via email requesting those questions from the Psap Managers Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Agenda item number 5. Are there any announcements from the membership at this time? Okay, with no further business, the meeting is now adjourned.